Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Hi, I am Dustin Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We want to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. You know, if you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on The Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you. Our past guests have been invited back to contribute yet again to this Series 2. We do this quarterly anthology. We will be doing this after our 200 episode milestone. As of this last quarter, we reached 200 episodes, and past that, get up and get a copy immediately. This is the only TV show on earth for creative writers, and our guests are amazing. They're also community activists building from the ground up. This program is for everybody out there who is a creative mind. Order several copies if you can and donate to local libraries. Give them to your friends, cousins, fans, supporters, anybody that you think loves poetry. And it's not just poetry in this book. Remember, this is creative mind. So we have prose, fiction, short stories, essays, artwork, anything you can think of, artistically creative, photographs. Everything in this book is packed. It is packed. It is just absolutely packed. If you want to get your hands on it now. Hello, welcome to the World Inkers Network, episode 236, formerly Parrot TV's Literary Corner. Today, and I am Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Today, we have Kevin R Pennington, who is a disabled poet, and he's the author of Space-Time Nirvana, published this month by Alien Buddha Press. He is published in numerous journals, including Sensitive Skin, The Alien Buddha Got So High, multiple The Alien Buddha Press e-zines, and LUD Literatura in translation. Sorry about that. He digs Buddhism, jazz, pop culture, and theoretical physics. He is a contributing editor of the Sunflower Collective. Thanks for joining us today, Kevin. I hope you're having a great day. So how is life where you're located?
Well, it's pretty cold here in Oklahoma.
Oh, is it really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cold. I think it's about 25 degrees outside. But other than that, it's really great here.
Excellent. So, I mean, when did you get into poetry? When was your moment of approaching poetry like, you know, an art, like it was really something you wanted to dedicate yourself to?
Well, really, it was in high school. I didn't have much distinction in high school. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't an academic. I didn't really have any distinctions or honors in high school. And then I started participating in forensics.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, I was doing poetry readings. And my instructor started giving me poetry that I didn't understand at all. He was giving me T.S. Eliot, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock to read, Beowulf, Alexander Pope, things that were really beyond the scope of what I was understanding. But he was teaching me how to read it in front of an audience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what that happened was I said, I don't understand this. I have to understand this if I'm going to be reading it. So that started a lifelong quest of actually learning what poetry was and how I could understand it.
So when you're reading poetry at that age and you didn't really understand like T.S. Eliot or Beowulf, what were your emotional reactions to it, or do you remember?
Well, I became actually very close to the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock because the figure of Prufrock is one of inaction.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of hesitation and patience, I would say. And that was very much also the person that I was early on in high school. I was a person who hesitated. I thought things through meticulously.
Mm-hmm.
And so when J.C. Scott, my instructor, gave me this poem, it's almost like he gave me a model to go ahead and fill out the edges of my personality, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
So I started collecting poems, and that became the knowledge base that I filled in.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So when you go back and you look at, Prufrock or one of the formative pieces that it helped you emerge as a poet and develop your identity as a poet, how do you feel now in reading Prufrock, or have you read it lately? And do you feel like a kind of nostalgia, or like when I read a poem that I read when I was young and I relate to it, it gives me an uplifting sense. For some reason, it's a lot more powerful if I've read it when I was younger than if I read it now. Like if I had a moment when I was going through a crisis and I read a poem, or when I was young, especially, that for some reason I relate to it strongly more than I would say in comparison to a poem I just read, in a moment of boredom or something. So do you find that the poems that you read when you were in your formative years, you relate more powerfully to them than poems that you would read, just on a daily basis?
Yes, I would, but I would not say that Eliot would be the formative piece that we would be discussing. I would actually say that would be Allen Ginsberg.
Okay.
Um,
Excellent.
what happened was I took several years off from college. I took 1 year in, I ran out of money. I took several years off, and then I returned to college in 1999. And in 2000, my instructor gave me Allen Ginsberg's Howl and Kaddish to read.
Mm-hmm.
And Howl hit me like a freight train. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there going, this is the most amazing thing I've ever read in my life. It was as well constructed as any poem I had ever encountered. And more so, it was a poet, not necessarily of my generation, but a poet of my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so Allen Ginsberg became a very influential poet upon me. And even into this day, his method of composition forms basically the basis of my method of composition, which is first thought, best thought, and writing mindful.
That's interesting. We've talked about that with some other the beat writers that we've interviewed. The first thought, best thought, and the mindfulness. And I when I first read How, I was about 16 or 17, I think, and I was more fond of Kerouac. I loved Kerouac's prose. I loved his poetry. But when I read How, for some reason, I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. I liked some of the language, but at the time, I didn't really incorporate it. I didn't really, appreciate it until I was like in my mid-20s or so. I went back and read some other Ginsberg poetry, and just
Right.
it struck me like a freight train. I was like, wow, I really like this. This is beautiful. When I read it, and I think when I was like 16 or 17, I was still developing an interest in poetry. And,
Right.
and he can be kind of tricky sometimes, a little bit.
I think if I had encountered Howl at 16, I don't think I would have had the same reaction to it as I had when I was older.
Right.
Because I encountered it, I want to say, when I was 22,
That's about when I got into Ginsberg, around that age. Yeah, that was definitely my age for the revival of Ginsberg. I think when I was like 16, the long sentences were like distracting to me.
Unknown caller.
Oops, caller.
Excuse me.
Welcome, caller.
And of course, it's a scam likely call.
Yeah, I get those a lot, so no problem. Yeah, so when you when you read Ginsberg, I mean, what were your initial impressions as a poet reading? I mean, were you already writing poetry at the time?
I was writing poetry at the time, not nearly as well as I do now,
Mm-hmm.
but um, what I took away was actually the wrong things, because I took first thought, best thought way too literally, and I thought that you shouldn't revise.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm of a completely different mind that you should revise and that you should attempt to revise back to the original thought. I kind of think of it like a bonsai tree. So you what you want to do is you want to cut the right edges off so that the right stems are remaining. Does that make any sense?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think it's I understand totally what you mean. Like you don't want to just write, whatever, just comes to mind. I mean, that's part of how you get initial impressions from your writing. But when you do stream of consciousness, you just jot out some ideas. But then when you go down to it, you want to recognize what you're trying to say. And as the surrealist used to say, one of the surrealists wrote a surrealist poem, but they saw him editing, and he said, "Well, that's not really automatic writing, is it?" And someone, he responded, I think it was Breton, responded, "Well, I'm making it seem more automatic by editing it." So it's sort of like the same principle in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it was it's definitely, editing is definitely necessary. So how does in your new book, which is what is it called again?
Space-Time Nirvana.
Space-Time Nirvana. So where's the idea for that come from?
Well, the idea for Space-Time Nirvana is actually a linking of two of the concepts that I really like. Space-time, which is from general relativity, so that's theoretical physics, and then Nirvana, which is the Buddhist concept of enlightenment and nothingness after passing on, instead of continuing into the circle of life and death.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I combined those two concepts into one. So it's a theoretical physics attempt at spirituality, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a journey through my own mental illness.
Interesting. So in this journey, did you have revelations through writing the poetry that you wouldn't have had, without the poetry? Did you realize things in writing it that you wouldn't have known before?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, let me just go ahead and bring up, I'm not going to read the entire thing because Three Visions in the Mental Ward is a long poem.
Mm-hmm.
But let me just go ahead and read. Well, actually, the one that I'm thinking of is Shame Spiral. Let me bring that up here.
For you guys watching out there, you can leave comments for our guest, Kevin Pennington, today, World Inkers Network. We're watching, and he's going to read us a little section of wonderful poetry that showed that revelation can happen through poetry.
The last stanza of Shame Spiral goes, "I bury myself in books, reading about quantum physics, black holes, and the fields that underlie all physics. I learned to hone my strength. I learned to live my life a little more every day. I put suicide behind me, the ghost in the back of my mind. I meditate on my fate. Poetry is my only therapy.
Wow. Yeah, that I feel I can relate to that. I'm also, I'm schizoaffective, bipolar, full disclosure. So I relate, I've been hospitalized many, many times and gone through the whole, suicide watch and everything, many
Yeah.
times. So it's very tough, and I wrote a lot of poetry in those periods and wrote a lot and developed my craft, and and it's really interesting that you bring that to life there.
Yeah, it's one of the main things that I talk about throughout the course of the book.
Mhm.
What I've tried to do is I've tried to arrange it as a kind of a journey where I've opened the book with the second poem being the second poem being uh, Across the Wounded City, which
Mhm.
was the piece that appeared in Sensitive Skin. And then it goes a little bit further into Shame Spiral. Shame Spiral details my first hospitalization. And then there's Three Visions in the Mental Ward. Three Visions in the Mental Ward is kind of the central piece of the book.
Mhm.
And in this in this piece, essentially what happened was I went into the hospital and I had a series of visions.
Mhm.
The first vision was of Ganesha, the Indian god.
Mhm.
The second vision was a Buddhistava. Um, I don't know her name. I couldn't understand her. And the third vision was of Allen Ginsberg in a New York apartment. And so I've written these visions down and included them in the book as the central piece.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the keystone that the book rests upon. But it's a very long poem, and I don't think we probably have time for it today.
Right.
It's a
Yeah, it sounds interesting though. It's a fascinating idea that a fascinating process that when you're having visions or losing your mind, really it is what it amounts to. Your mind, your the control of your mind, just you lose it and you enter into another dimension. It seems like, and I've had very similar experiences where I had when I was hospitalized once. I had a vision of like this cherub with these really long wings, and on these wings were all these little mouths that were chattering and they were all talking and but they weren't,
yes.
I couldn't understand anything that was being said. It was just like just kind of weird like static noises, and so I thought that was when you mentioned the visions where you couldn't understand what was being said and things like that, it's like it must be a part of the brain that gets activated and it can't process like auditory or something. I don't know, maybe that's what it is. It's very interesting though. You brought that to light there in that process and in that piece that you read, that section of that poem. So space time nirvana, is that kind of like your the part of the description of the experience of going mad or losing your mind and just like letting your mind float out and into some sort of little journey outside of itself and just kind of letting go of it.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
That's exactly what I meant by that.
Interesting.
It's really um, because what I guess what I've composed is uh, you have the crisis and you have the creativity, and then you also have the spirituality that ties the two together.
Hmm. Right. So there's like a spiritual element to madness and in part. I think a lot of postmodernists would kind of bridge the two. You know,
Right.
like I mean, it's a really erratic experience and it can be unsettling. And I think a lot of the saints of past and we talk about stories of the saints and the different experiences they had as a mystics, and sometimes
Right.
it can be an overwhelming sense of like the light just pushes onto you and you just get struck. And
Right.
And a lot of times it can be very painful and frustrating, and I think that is equivalent to a kind of madness. And
Another thing that was extremely interesting was that after having these visions, one of which was Allen Ginsberg, I was released from the hospital on his 93rd birthday.
Oh wow! So there's not only the experience of seeing him, but also that moment of release being from on his birthday. So there was a coincidence right there, sort of a synchronicity going on.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I try to, the way I frame it sometimes is God is close to the people that are sort of on the outskirts of society that aren't really understood. God loves people that are misunderstood. And so we have communications that other people don't get, and poets are the most misunderstood people.
Exactly.
Would you say we would want to be understood? Maybe we don't really want to be understood. Maybe that's something that our secret, we don't want people to really get what we're trying to say or who we are. We want to be on the outskirts in a lot of ways.
Well, I would say that, yes, I do want to be on the outskirts somewhat.
Right.
I mean, the idea of being famous in the way that Allen Ginsberg was famous, I don't think I could ever handle that.
Right. It must have been troubling for him too. I mean, you get all that attention and people focusing on everything you're doing, and people coming up to you in the street, when you're walking, you're just trying to walk and mind your own business.
Right. I don't think that I could ever handle that, but
yeah, I think fame is problematic. The concept, I don't understand it. It's like, why do people search for this? Because they have this quest of this golden grail of being famous, and it's like, what is fame? I mean, a lot of people looking at you and talking about you. Is it being on TV? Is it, I mean, what is it? I mean, what would you say fame is?
I don't even really know that I know what fame is, truth to tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question.
I think I'd have to ponder that. Perhaps I'll have to write a poem about it.
I say do it. It could be the famous and the mad, it'd be like The Beautiful and the Damned, Fitzgerald's book, It's very interesting that, you had this massive, experience of like the flooding in of the visions, and did you write during that period, like while that was happening, or was it later on or before, or what was the time period like?
Well, I didn't write during the visions themselves. But after I got out of the hospital, what I did was I wrote down each vision separately as its own poem.
Okay.
And that took about a year to assemble, because the visions were very intense. So there was a lot of emotional connection involved.
Right.
So
processing it.
Right. I had to process all of the emotions before I could get to the actual poetry. And at first, I wasn't even sure that it would actually be a publishable poem.
Mm-hmm.
I suspected at first that it was just a form of self-therapy and that I was just recording the visions for my own prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
But once I had actually recorded the visions and put them together, I sent them to Abhimanyu Kumar, who is my co-editor at the Sunflower Collective. And he looked at it and he was like, "Are you kidding? This is not only publishable, it's fantastic." And he immediately published it on the Sunflower Collective.
Wow. Interesting. So we're going to take a brief break, and we'll come back with some more poetry talk and a little bit of this interesting poetry that we're talking about with Kevin. He'll share some of it with us. So stay tuned at World Inkers Network. Hi, I am Dustin Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We want to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. if you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on the Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you. Our past guests have been invited back to contribute yet again to this series 2. We do this quarterly anthology. We will be doing this after our 200 episode milestone. As of this last quarter, we reached 200 episodes, and past that, get up and get a copy immediately. This is the only TV show on earth for creative writers, and our guests are amazing. They're also community activists building from the ground up. This program is for everybody out there who is a creative mind. Order several copies if you can and donate to local libraries. Give them to your friends, cousins, fans, supporters, anybody that you think loves poetry. And it's not just poetry in this book. Remember, this is creative mind. So we have prose, fiction, short stories, essays, artwork, anything you can think of, artistically creative, photographs. Everything in this book is packed. It is packed. It is just absolutely packed. If you want to get your hands on it now. Welcome back to World Inkers Network, Poetry and Madness. That's what we're discussing. And Allen Ginsberg. So, Kevin, would you like to read us a couple of your fine works, maybe from Space Time Nirvana or from something you're working on now even?
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and start with something that I just finished the other day.
Okay.
This is Morning Time. Fill my mouth with black coffee to savor dreams before I wake, before I go outside in ritual surrender of visions and ambitions. The liquid inside burns my belly, makes my hands shake.
Visions and ambitions. I love the way those words flow together.
I do too.
It's a fun phrase. That might be a good poem in and of itself. Visions and ambitions. You can share another one with us if you like. That one was pretty short. It was excellent. I thought you captured a kind of getting ready for the day and getting ready to get moving and that kind of thing that we all experience.
Let me do a little bit of a longer one here, not too long. Science fiction. Growing up, I read books and short stories of spaceships, lightsabers, Captain Tight Pants, and don't forget the sexy princess, space marines, telepathy, spice addictions, giant mecha that changed shape from robot to spaceship in an endless space opera, with cartoon physics in an anime world wherein violence solves every problem. Hacking is as simple as smiling. Androids speak with emotions. Giant space worms, slug-like in form, command legions of clones. As I read, my life became far away. I lived in my own mind, only coming out for an instant for dinner with my PTSD father or torture from high school bullies. The constructed reality of fiction saved me in many ways. It gave me safety in unsafe days, but one cannot live in words forever. I emerged from the cocoon of language when I met her. She opened the door on the first date and smiled. She was kind and patient. She put up with my bullshit. She became my wife. I receded from the shores of fiction. The wall I had built, the castle I created, now had cracks where the light could get in.
I really love that last image and the association with a sort of experience of friendliness of somebody and love and generosity of their time and compassion. And I thought you described that really well, being kind of closed off from the world outside and because of as you mentioned in the poem, bullies and you grow up, and you're kind of an oddball that you get picked on a lot. I did. I
Yeah,
got picked on quite a
exactly.
bit. I got beat up a lot. It was a really rough experience to get to mature out of that. I had anger issues for a long time that
Right.
I had to work out, and
Yeah, so did I.
yeah, I would advise anybody that's currently in a situation where they're bullying or being bullied that needs to stop, because that hurts people for life. It
Yes,
may
it
seem like a
does.
small thing, but it does hurt your self-esteem. It hurts a person's, self-image, and it leads to, a lot of physiological issues for me too. I had issues with my health, because of the excessive bullying. The anger brought just a lot of frustration on me that I didn't want, and was very hard to overcome. Took me a lot of years. I'm sure you can relate to that as well.
Oh, yes, I can.
Yeah, it's a
I
really
was in
rough
a
experience. But
I
you
was
brought
in
that
a
to life. You really did that vast image, especially with the castle and the light coming through. And yeah, I think we recognize our worth as people, but when it comes to it, other people don't necessarily recognize that. They don't recognize, who we are as individuals, that we all are entitled to be on this planet. And you mentioned in some of your other work, you have one poem that I read that talks about, this kid, this racist kid on the bus or something, and he starts spouting off, his racist sentiments and vote for this
right,
racist person, this candidate. And
right.
I know
Yeah.
some people don't really see the worth of other people sometimes, and they like to direct all their energy out to against that person or against that group, instead of trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And what we try and do at the Sunflower Collective,
Hmm.
uh, kind of our motto behind the scenes is we try to give voices to the voiceless. So, for instance, one of the groups that we published was the Misa Poets. They were being persecuted by the Indian government. So, as soon as they started being persecuted, we went out and we published those poets immediately so that their work could be spread.
Hmm. That takes a lot of guts, and it's really good that you did that. So, tell us a little bit more about the Sunflower Collective. I'm curious about what does the name mean, and what other missions do you have? Who else have you published?
Oh, well, the name really comes from because we're kind of we all want to be beats basically. uh, and so sunflower kind of comes from the Sunflower Sutra.
Hmm.
uh, Collective comes from the fact that we're kind of all Marxist. um, you know we're a collective. That's
Right.
how we kind of think of ourselves. So we've kind of put the two together, and we're the Sunflower Collective.
Okay.
Um, we published a lot of poets, um, and not just poets. We also do interviews. We do prose. We do translations. We do a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
But some of the poets that we have published are, and you're going to have to forgive me because I may mispronounce some of the Indian poets. Um, but Roy, in fact, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it, but he's an extremely prestigious Indian poet
Okay.
who wrote, it translates to Stark Modern Jesus, Stark Electric Jesus, excuse me. It's an amazing poem, and it's on the Sunflower Collective if you want to read it in English. Uh, and then we've also published on the American side Bruce Bond.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with his
I
work.
recognize the name, but I don't think I'm familiar with his work at all. Sounds like
And
the cat is, though. Yeah.
as I was telling Dustin backstage, my cat is named Duncan after the poet
Robert.
Robert Duncan.
So, what is your affiliation with Robert Duncan? When did you get introduced to his work? He's another sort of, you have to be in your late 20s to get kind of poet.
Well, I discovered Robert Duncan because basically when I was studying at Pratt Community College,
Mm-hmm.
I got this really fat anthology. And I was like, so I want to be a poet, so I should read all of this. So I read all the poets that were in it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I read Robert Duncan, I read Amiri Baraka, I read Gwendolyn Brooks. I read everyone in there that I could find. Those just happen to be three that are highly influential on me.
Right. Excellent poets, all three of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Robert Duncan just, I thought that he stood out. His poem, um, Sometimes I Am Permitted to Return to the Meadow,
Mm-hmm.
is just an amazing piece that the complexity of it, I just think, is almost unparalleled in American verse.
Yeah. I think he was a little bit associated with the Black Mountain School, or at least some of those poets like Robert Creeley and people like that. I think he had association with them. I don't think he was part of that movement, but he was within that circle at some point.
I think that he taught at Black Mountain College.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I believe that he had an association with Charles Olson,
Okay. Yeah.
who was the rector there.
If you read an anthology called Voice That Is Great Within Us, have you heard of that? Hayden Carruth is the editor of that. Really great anthology. It's very popular.
No, I haven't read it, but I'm definitely interested in it.
Yeah, take a look. You can probably find it at like Barnes and Noble or just anywhere. It's a little paperback, and it's full of modern, contemporary poets from, it's about published in about the 60s or 70s, I think. But it's a lot of starting with like Frost all the way, some of the ones you mentioned, Robert Duncan and Gwendolyn Brooks, and all the way up until Yvonne Winters. I mean, a lot of poets I like these days. I've found in that book, lots and lots of different poets in there. Really good anthology, and it's a lot of stuff that's not necessarily popular poetry. It's like some of the popular pieces, but also has some of the other pieces that are lesser known. I think Carruth was a really good editor in that capacity. He's also a poet himself, and he was a fantastic poet.
I think poets make the best editors.
Absolutely, especially when choosing and selecting.
Yes.
So what would you say in conclusion, words of wisdom, advice to fellow poets, writers out there, scholars of writing? What would you give? What kind of advice would you give?
Well, when I studied with David Quick at Wichita State University, he gave me some advice. He said, one brushstroke is as good as any other.
Mm-hmm.
And then he applied it to poetry. He said, one page is as good as any other. One line is as good as any other. One word is as good as any other. And I've always taken that to mean that you should not be judgmental about what you're writing until you've finished it. And then you can look at it and go, well, this didn't work, or this is pretty good. But while you're in your composition stage, don't be judgmental about what you're working on until you've finished it.
Right. And that kind of goes back around, cycling back to our first thought, best thought, and being mindful in the verse. Do you have any shout outs you'd like to throw out for us? So friends, family, supporters?
Absolutely. I'd like to give a huge shout out to Kristen Pennington, David B. Prather, Marcus Wilson, and definitely to Sean Verkoviak.
Right. Excellent. And then Alien Buddha Press as well.
Absolutely.
His wonderful wife and him, and they're wonderful people. I just want to say hello to them myself as we're speaking, and your publisher. Alien Buddha Press has published several of my own works, so I'm very grateful for them. And so check out Space Time Nirvana from Kevin Pennington. Today we had him on the show. If you want to go back and look at some of our discussion, we talked about poetry and madness, and a lot of excellent subjects to just can revolve around poetry. So, we want to keep these discussions alive. So if you want to support World Inkers Network, we have a PayPal you can donate to. That's paypal.me/nyparrot. paypal.me/nyparrot. You can donate to that. Thank you, Cranium Slows, for this. He says, thanks for this interview. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching. We'd love to have you again. Subscribe to our YouTube if you haven't. World Inkers Network. If you want to be on the show, anybody that wants to be on the show, we invite you, all kinds of creative minds. And if you have music video you'd like to share on the show, send it my way as well, or a spoken word performance you have. We'd love to hear from you. So that would be, you can email us at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And that's an excellent way to be in touch with me, Dustin Pickering. So thanks again for watching. Subscribe. As you see behind me here, subscribe, like, share, and comment on our just tell us what you think. We want to hear from you. And when we're doing one of these shows, just give you open comments. We will display them on the show. So thank you again, Kevin, and thanks to our viewers. And get out there, do some writing. Have an excellent afternoon. This is World Inkers Network. Hi, I am Dustin Pickering from Parrot Literary Corner. You know me, your noble and honest host, and I've got exciting news for you. Last anthology, Series 1, The Literary Parrot, did such a great job. We want to continue to provide this community service to our viewers and to our contributors to the program. So please get up and get a copy immediately. If you're in this book, you want to get a copy. If you're not in the book, you want to get a copy and see what we're doing. You want to be excited with us. We want you on this program, and we hope to see you sometime soon on The Literary Parrot. You have to get your hands on this copy. It's amazing. It's an absolutely beautiful anthology meant just for you. Our past guests have been invited back to contribute yet again to this Series 2. We do this quarterly anthology. We will be doing this after our 200 episode milestone. As of this last quarter, we reached 200 episodes, and past that, get up and get a copy immediately. This is the only TV show on earth for creative writers, and our guests are amazing. They're also community activists building from the ground up. This program is for everybody out there who is a creative mind. Order several copies if you can, and donate to local libraries. Give them to your friends, cousins, fans, supporters, anybody that you think loves poetry. And it's not just poetry in this book. Remember, this is creative mind. So we have prose, fiction, short stories, essays, artwork, anything you can think of, artistically creative, photographs.